Well, I just want to tell you guys how much I appreciate your support and encouragement with having my wife speak last week. I got a number of text messages from you guys being very supportive, saying things like, Tim, you don't need to come back. Send your wife from now on. She knows more about this than you do. We learned a lot. So anyway, I do appreciate y'all's support. That was so helpful and encouraging. And I just want to affirm what Cindy said last week, how proud I am of you guys for your willingness and your desire to learn how to grow in your masculinity and what that means for us and where we need to be moving. And today, we're going to dive into the second part of the husband-wife relationship. And as I said to the single guys before, this is an important lesson for you for a couple reasons. One is you may be married at some point in time, so you need to hear this. And two, you need to support your brothers who are married. So don't just check out if you're single. Stay with us and focus, because we're going to be talking about something that is just absolutely brilliant. So the God of the universe, who created men and women, created masculinity and femininity, has an amazing plan for how marriage works. And when we work his plan, it makes life great for everybody involved. Let me contrast that with the world in which we live. When you just try to get your mind around the presidential election, and you think to yourself, between watching the candidates and the media, like these are the smartest, most intelligent, most capable, most... You can't even have a 3-sentence conversation. You can only have a 1-sentence conversation because only one sentence will make a sound bite. And we're supposed to make up our mind who we're going to pick to be the leader of the free world based on 1-sentence sound bites. So you can't even have like a paragraph conversation to understand what somebody believes about the issues. That's the condition of our world. And gentlemen, that's what's considered wisdom, wise, intelligent. Okay? So oftentimes people look at the Bible, they go, oh, that's outdated. Well, bring back the outdated if what we're having and what we're seeing and how we're dealing with the problems in our world today is current, progressive, good, wise. In fact, I tell my kids all the time, I believe in a devil. I believe that there's a Satan, an evil in the world. And here's how I validate that. Because smart people could not be so stupid. I mean, I look at the world around me and think, how could smart people be so stupid? There's got to be some sinister force out there. So what we're going to be looking at today, God's design for marriage is different than the current cultural trends. And when we look at it, you're going to see the wisdom of God in contrast to the foolish experiments that cultures do over and over again. So we started 2 weeks ago with this discussion, and we looked at the two kind of normal models of marriage that we see in our world today. The first one was the top-down traditional. That is where the husband is the ruler, the boss. He sits at the top. The wife is there to serve him, do his bidding, and all the benefits flow up to him. That's called the authoritarian model of leadership or of marriage. And we said that a lot of people confuse the biblical model with this authoritarian model, and that's not what the Bible teaches. The second model that we looked at is the one that's currently embraced by our culture today. We called that the 50-50 mythical model. That is, she takes half, he takes half. And the reason why we call it the 50-50 mythical model is because what does half mean? Who's really responsible? Is anybody looking at the big picture? And we noticed in that model that actually you have a chaotic and a frustrating approach. So that's called the egalitarian model. That functions under the premise that if somebody is responsible, then they are better. And that's one of the lies of Satan that people have bought into in the world because they confuse that with the top-down traditional. That's called the egalitarian model, the 50-50 mythical, egalitarian, equal. It's about getting equal. The third view that we're going to look at today is what we would call the biblical view of marriage, and that's the complementarian view. In other words, God created masculinity and femininity to complement each other, and when men are doing their part and women are doing their part, working in a side-by-side symbiotic relationship, bringing their complementary skills to the table and working together as a team, when they do that, human thriving occurs. People benefit. Masculinity is upheld and encouraged and fostered, and it grows. Femininity is honored and cherished, and it grows. And children have the best opportunity to be raised in a stable environment. So this is the wisdom of God. So as you look at your sheet there, we're going to talk about three things today. One is core roles. One is core responsibilities, and the third is core concerns. Now, we use the word core very strategically. Core does not mean comprehensive. In other words, we're not saying by core that this is the only thing a man can do, or this is the only thing a woman can do. What we mean by core is that men have something that's essential that they must focus on. Women have things that are essential that they must focus on that actually fits their gender and their wiring. This is the way God made us. And when those essential things are focused on, the marriage works, which gives them freedom to actually add all kinds of other things. And so you'll see this kind of complementarian relationship worked out by two couples, and as they're working on their core roles, core responsibilities, core responses, as they're working on those two things, the way they structure and operate within their marriage could be very different. In other words, it's not cookie cutter. It recognizes that every man has certain gifts and skill sets and things. As long as he focuses on the core, the marriage works. Women will have different kinds of gifts, skill sets, the things they're good at, the things they have interest in. They'll be very different. And so you won't see two people following this model, and you look at one couple, you look at another couple, you say, well, the way they're living it out and the way these two are living it out are very different. There's a lot of freedom. But if the core is not tended to, then problems occur. So, on your sheet there, looking at the core roles, I want you to notice that the two circles are side by side. There's not one of the two that's better than the other. They're side by side. They're equal value. They just have different roles. So the core role, if you start on the side on the right, you want to put the word head in there, and right underneath the word husband. Head, husband. In Ephesians 5:22, it says that the husband is the head of the wife. Now, oftentimes when we think of head, we think of position or power. That's not what the Bible's talking about. Oftentimes when we think of head, we think of the place that thinks. That's not what the Bible's talking about. When the Bible refers to head, the Bible is referring to direction. Direction, setting the direction. And last week, 2 weeks ago, we looked at the concept of servant leadership. So if you want to write that there in the blank, servant leader, the head's responsibility is to make sure that the family has a direction, to make sure that the big picture is being paid attention to, and to make sure that the benefits accrued by the family and what the family produces is being equally distributed and shared so everybody benefits. Okay? Everybody benefits. It's not that the head is at the top so the benefits all flow up and the husband has everything going his way. It's the husband's responsibility to make sure that things are shared. The example we used of masculinity is the example of Jesus, who didn't come to build an empire, to put himself at the top so that he would get all the benefits coming his way. He came as one who served, one who took care of, one who provided for, one who gave himself to save others. That's the role of the head. On the other side, put the word helper. On the left-hand side, put the word helper, and below it, you could write the word wife. Now you say, where does this term come from? In Genesis 2:18, we went through these passages, so I'm just going to remind you of them. In Genesis 2:18, Adam is there in the garden, and God says, it's not good for man to be alone. I will make a helper suitable for him. Two things about the word helper. That word is an exalted word in Scripture. It's not the word for servant or slave or somebody to do your laundry. That's not what the word means. It's actually used of all three persons of the Trinity at various times. The word helper is somebody that comes alongside to form a team. Okay? The question that we have to ask and answer is, help him do what? And this is where it becomes very critical. When God makes man and woman, male and female, he says, let us make man in our image, male and female, and let them do two things. Let them be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth. One of the God-given roles of marriage is the capacity and the responsibility to birth and raise and nurture the next generation. Birth and raise and nurture the next generation. Now, in the 70s, we were told that the world was overpopulated, and because the world was overpopulated, it was actually the responsibility of good citizens to stop having kids. And that's what happened. Now, we see countries like Japan that are actually not capable of sustaining their economic system anymore because they've gone to zero population growth because people quit having kids. In Germany, the prime minister is bringing in refugees. Part of her motivation to do that, as she said herself, is that we do not have enough young Germans being born in the country to actually keep our country going. The United States is on the same trajectory. When a country reaches zero population growth, it begins to die out in a few generations. That's what's taking place globally right now because we've lost this idea of the value of being fruitful, multiply, filling the earth with children, having children. Somebody walks into a restaurant with 4 kids, and everybody looks at that person as if they're weird. Like, who would do such a crazy thing? But that is a valuable and important part of being a human on the planet, is to leave behind children who can grow up in a godly way to populate and fill the earth and continue to perpetuate godliness on the planet. That's part of it, okay? And the benefits to you as a human to raise and nurture and love a child will transform you. In fact, one of the best ways to grow, and certainly for men to grow up, is to have responsibility for a child. It changes who you are. And the happiness quotient for those who have kids, like study after study after study, is off the charts. It changes your whole life. So what is she supposed to help him? She's supposed to help him birth and raise the next generation of God-fearers on the planet. Secondly, is to subdue the earth and rule over it. In other words, to represent God, to build society. So her role is not simply in the kitchen, barefoot and pregnant, as it's been mischaracterized by many people and taken advantage of by the top-down traditional model. Her role is exalted to work together as a team to do world-changing activities ordained by God. And she helps him in that role. So it's an exalted term, and it's a term that gives a man and a woman the opportunity to come together as a team and do some incredible things together. Second, when we move to the core responses, these aren't the core roles, these are the core responses. So how does the man respond to the woman in this relationship? How does the woman respond to the man in this relationship? If you look at the right, put in the phrases praise and honor. The core response of the husband to his wife is to praise and honor her and her contribution. Under that, you might want to write these words: to keep her value and equality in view. To keep her value and equality in view. One of the most significant ways that Satan has deceived women, starting in the Garden of Eden with Eve, is to believe that if God's put him in the role of the one responsible, therefore I have less value, I have less worth. So it's the responsibility of the person in that role to continue to affirm and value and honor the equality of their spouse, of their wife, to keep that in focus and to keep talking about it. That's why Peter says in 1 Peter 3:7, you might want to write this in, husbands, grant her honor as heirs of the gracious gift of life. In other words, her standing before God is the same as you're standing before God, and part of your job is to keep reminding her of her value, of her worth, of how equal she is, of how important she is, of how necessary she is, because, remember what God said? It is not good for man to be alone. And we know that's true, okay? We need our wives. We need women. And so to constantly keep that in front of her, what is her response to her husband? Write in the words, submit and respect. Submit and respect. In Ephesians chapter 5, verse 23, wives, submit to your husbands as unto the Lord. Wives, submit to your husbands as unto the Lord. What that means is her response to him is to basically vote yes for his leadership. I'm going to work with my husband. I'm going to help my husband. I'm going to encourage him in his job to take responsibility for our family. Now, what are the alternatives? One of the alternatives is she can fight him. And here's what happens. We've been talking about this, right? What happens when guys find out that somebody else is actually willing to do it? Passivity, right? Remember, in Garden of Eden, all the way back, what guys have a tendency to do. That's why our definition is rejects passivity, accepts responsibility, leads courageously, expects the greater reward, God's reward. That's why the anthropologist Margaret Mead that we've been quoting over and over again, she says the most significant thing every society has to decide is what are the appropriate roles for men? Because in the absence of men needing and having to take responsibility, they often move into passivity. And what many women have found is, because of their natural leadership gifts and so forth, they come into the marriage and they say, listen, I'm not going to let you lead. And a lot of men go, great, I'll watch the game. I'll play video games. I'll go to the golf course. I'll spend a couple hours a day at the gym. Honey, if you want it, you can have it. And so what are the alternatives? One of those things is that she can take over. The second thing is you can fight about it. You can fight about it. Who gets to decide what's the direction we're going to go? Well, I've got my idea, you got your idea, let's just fight about it. But the biblical model is that she is willing to respect, give him what he needs, encouragement, and to work with him. The word submit means to arrange your affairs under. In other words, as the husband takes responsibility to give leadership and direction to the family, the wife is willing to say, okay, honey, I want you in that role. In fact, I know you need to be in that role, because if you're not, I know what happens to your masculinity, and I'm going to arrange my affairs in concert with you, teamwork with you. Now, we get this in every relationship where the players are willing to work with the coach. Doesn't mean that they don't have their own creativity and abilities. They just work with the coach. Where employers and employees work together. Doesn't mean that they don't have worth or value. They just work together. That's how things work. And if you've got two incredible tasks, raise the next generation of children and represent God on the planet, these are hard things to do. So it requires cooperation and teamwork. So how does she keep his leadership in view? In fact, you might want to write that under submit and respect, because I think that's the key phrase. She keeps his leadership in view. How does she do that? I think she does that by participating, asking questions. In fact, I would submit to you that what has traditionally been called nagging in the top-down traditional model is exactly what respect and submission requires of a woman. So here are the questions that she can ask. She can ask questions like, honey, where's this family going? Honey, what is our financial plan? Honey, how are we going to raise our kids in a godly way? Honey, what are we going to do to grow in our relationship? And guys, if you hear those kinds of questions and you push back on that, like leave me alone, that's an indication that you're not taking responsibility. Those kinds of questions are questions of respect. Why would I ask you that question if I didn't think you had some kind of an answer? And so when wives are entering in and placing heavily upon their husbands that I believe in you and I believe that you and I can come up with something together and it's your job to take responsibility to do this, that will bring out the best in you. I'm going to enter into those conversations with you. And when we our wives, oh, don't ask me that, then we're not doing our job, okay? That's true submission and respect. So head helper are the core roles, core responses. For the husband is to praise and honor his wife, for the wife to submit and respect her husband. So what are the core concerns then? I think there are basically four major concerns that men have that they need in their relationship with their wife, and then we're going to talk about the ones that the wives need in their husbands. And the way I want to do this is I want to spend a little bit more time on the wives and the husbands, and we're going to cover this pretty quickly. So let's start with the husbands. The first one is this: companionship. Husbands need companionship. A husband wants someone who wants to be with him, someone who wants to grow old together with him, someone who wants to share some of his interest with him, a companion to be there through life together. Now, one of the problems between men and women is the way we do companionship is very different. And so, like, March Madness is coming. And you guys are all excited about Michigan State and their prospects of going to the Final Four. And so you guys are all excited about that. So here's what happens. You're sitting on the couch watching a game, and she's coming through the living room with a basket of laundry. And you don't bother to say anything because you don't need to. You just reach over and pat the couch. And what does that mean? Come sit with me, right? So she puts down the laundry and she sits down beside you. And she's thinking, okay, I got a lot of things to do. He wants something, so she turns and starts looking at you, but you're not looking at her because you're looking at the TV. You just wanted a companion, right? And she's thinking, like, do you want to talk or something? And you're thinking, no, unless you want to comment on the game. I just want you to be here with me. And she's thinking, I've got a lot of things to do. You're not even looking at me, because when women talk, they talk face to face. When men talk, they talk this way. Like they sit and they observe the world and they talk about it. Very different approach. But men are looking for someone that will just be with them. Just be with them. Women have a whole different deal. They want to go deeper. We'll talk about them in just a minute. Second thing a man needs from his woman, from his wife, is support. Companionship and then support. Do you realize that during Operation Desert Storm, for every one soldier that was in active combat, there were 7 military personnel that were doing support behind the lines? Whether it was medical, whether it was supplies, whether it was logistics, whether it was communications, whether it was engineering, and a host of other things, for every one person that was on the line with a rifle, 7 people behind them. So in order to enable one person to go into the battle, there needed to be a whole support system to allow that person to fight. In fact, when it came to World War II, the same soldiers that marched into France with their guns above their head, waving in victory, were the same soldiers that were starving to death in Stalingrad. Why? Because Hitler overran his supply lines. He didn't have support to get to his soldiers. Same quality of soldiers in both battle, but a lack of support. And here's one of the challenges in our world today. When both man and woman go fully into the day-to-day battle to compete for the almighty dollar together, and there's nobody taking care of the support for the family, over time, the wounds and the pain and the struggle build up, and there's nobody tending to the nurture, to the care of the relationship of the kids, of the business of the family. And that's the culture that we've created for ourselves. And so a man can go and go and go and go and go as long as he can come home and realize that there's nurture that's being taken care of as part of the family. And it's incredibly dangerous to build an economic system where it requires both people to be slugging it out 40, 50, 60 hours a week and think somehow you're going to build quality of life. As if the money that can be, or the things that can be purchased by that kind of an aggressive approach to life are actually going to be valuable. I grew up in a home, 1,400 square feet, 6 people, 4 kids, 2 adults, 1 shower. You say, well, that's just unlivable. Oh, that's just unlivable. Right. And so let's put all of our effort and energy into sending both parties out to just get after it so that we can have 3 baths in the house, so that we don't have to work around each other. We can all be separate, isolated. Everybody gets their own bedroom. Everybody gets their own vehicle. Everybody gets their own space. Everybody gets their own bathroom. Is the quality of life improved by that? Will Durant, the famous historian, raised this issue. He said, in talking about the demise of the Roman Empire, he said, women began to go back into the workforce in droves in the demise of the Roman Empire. And here's what he said. It wasn't a problem with women working. He said, when women began to compete with men, they did not pick up the virtues of men, but they picked up their vices. So rather than men coming home and being re-civilized by their wives were going out into their world and becoming barbarians with the rest of the dog-eat-dog world. And so I'm not making a comment on whether women should work outside the home or not, or whether men should work outside the home. I'm not making a comment about that. I'm just raising the issue. Is it really possible? And I believe that there's some guys in here that are divorced today, not because the person that you married was a bad person, not because your relationship was doomed from the beginning, but because you developed an approach to life that was actually unsustainable for the two of you, and some of you are going to be headed down that path. It's just a matter of time. Because not tending to what is the overall health and how do we work together to create a sustainable standard of living and a sustainable pace, there's nothing in our culture that would support that. But men need that. Okay, number 3, admiration. Admiration. You know, the command in the Bible is not to the wives to love their husbands, but to respect their husbands. You know, men are not so motivated around the idea that I need someone to tell me that they love me all the time. I mean, like when we stood at the altar, she said she loved me. And like when I get up and I look at myself in the mirror, I think to myself, like who wouldn't love this? Like, that's how men are wired. Like, who wouldn't love this? Like, I mean, but what men really need is they need someone who will say, I believe in you. I will follow you. I so appreciate your willingness to make hard choices. Your sacrifice sets a tone in this family. Your love for us gives us life. And when a man hears those things, we are inspired. It feeds our masculinity. We are inspired to work harder, to love more, to give more, to lead better, to think better. Men need admiration. Part of the challenge we have in our culture today, and I think this again is one of those lies of Satan. We think love is unconditional, but respect must be earned. And so here's how that works out in the modern marriage today. Okay, husband, you're supposed to love me unconditionally no matter what I do. So whether I gain 50 pounds or whether I, just quit treating you well, you're still supposed to love me unconditionally, no matter what. But you've got to earn my respect. And so therefore, you better do everything right. Not recognizing that the very thing that helps men be motivated to do the right thing is to be granted respect. And that's why the Bible says, wives, respect your husbands. It doesn't say, wives, when they earn it, then you give it to them. In the same way that the Bible doesn't say to husbands, love your wives when they've earned it. Men need respect. And if your wife is in the Rethinking Womanhood study, she's being encouraged to think that way. You say, that's great. Mine's not coming. Great. Get a hold of the CDs. Put them under her pillow. Like, do something. If you're a single guy and you're trying to figure out who the girl is, get a couple copies of the Rethinking Woman, pass them out. Let them listen. And if she comes back and says, I don't agree with any of that. Oh, just save me 25 years of pain. How about that? The last one is physical responsiveness. Physical responsiveness. What we mean by physical responsiveness is sex. Okay, that she responds in a way that will open up the door and allow a good, healthy sexual relationship. The Bible views sex as a great thing within marriage. God loves it. He applauds it. In fact, we're going to do a whole lecture just on the whole issue of sex, masculinity and sex. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, but Just suffice it to say that the Bible says sex is good, and men need that from their wives. That's one of the ways that men emotionally bond with their wives is through sexual intimacy. And so we'll talk about the significance of that. Now we're going to jump over and talk about women. Saw a Valentine's card, and on the front flap it said, if you love something, set it free, and if it returns to you, then it is truly yours. And then you open the next flap and it says, and if it disappears, it was never truly yours to begin with. And then on the very inside cover, you see this big old fat guy sitting in a armchair. He's got a beer in one hand, bag of potato chips in his lap, a TV remote in the other hand, hair disheveled, bathrobe, chest hair sticking out through. And here's what the last line was. And if it just sits there, watching television, unaware that it has been set free, then you probably married it. Okay, here's what a wife needs from her husband. She also needs companionship. She also needs companionship, but she needs a different type of companionship. A woman wants companionship that goes deeper. She wants to know you. And she wants to be known by you. She wants to know you, and she wants to be known by you. The biggest complaint that wives give, 95%, when asked to list off what are the things that bug you about your husband, the biggest complaint is 95% say, he never talks to me. He never talks to me. Women do face-to-face. Men do side-to-side. Men tend to be more task-oriented, so they're looking at the task when they commune. Women are relationship. They look face to face. And so therefore, your wife wants you to want to know her. And here's where we defraud women. Most men will invest that time in courtship and in pre-marriage. And a woman falls in love with you because you listen and get to know her and you disclose. And then once we've got the deal sealed and locked up, the tendency is to get busy focusing on the things of our life and never take the time to really spend time together. So in the same way that you have a desire for her to be with you, companionship, but what you're looking for is the type of companionship that is kind of shoulder to shoulder. And a wife, if she learns that and does that, it's really helpful. In the same way, from time to time, you need to be willing to engage in the kind of companionship that nurtures her, because she needs that from you. Second is a wife needs security. A wife needs security. She needs to know that her man is taking care of her. She needs to know that her man is taking care of her. And so there are two ways that this really plays itself out. The first one is, where are we going, honey? Like, where are we going as a family? What is the plan? And for a husband to enter into those kinds of discussions with his wife and begin to plan the future and give clarity to the future, that nurtures a woman. She wants to know that somebody's paying attention and working with you toward those goals, working with her toward those goals. And so the last thing she wants is, you come home one day and you go, say, well, I just took a job in Buffalo. Well, a job in Buffalo, yeah, we're going to be moving the family. We have kids in school, right? Yeah, well, they got schools in Buffalo. Well, is this something that just came up? No, my boss started talking to me a year ago about this, but I didn't know if it would come together, so I didn't want to worry you. So when are we leaving? Oh, well, in about a month, we're headed out. That's just, what you've done at that moment is you've set in motion a course of distrust that will last the rest of your life. A woman needs to know that you have some idea. And if you have no idea, she needs to know that too. And so that's important for security. The second one is financial security. A woman needs to understand that you've got a plan to take care of her. A plan to take care of her. Now, does that include some of her income? It can, but here's the caution. Since a woman's primary wiring is nurture, even though she may have multiple degrees and a fantastic career, if a child in the family has special needs, that will be a huge pull on her emotionally. If her mother gets cancer, that's going to be a huge pull on her emotionally. And many women, when they rock along fine when everything's going fine, but when they realize that they need to take a break or do something different or cut back so that they can take care of the relationships, and you have crafted a lifestyle where that's not possible. You can't make the car payment on your Hummer unless she keeps her job. Deep resentment begins to set in. And it usually is not immediately directed at you. Usually it's a sense of worry. Well, what about, like, my child's having trouble and I need to be there, but I can't be there because it's all like we got bills to cover and I'm on the hook for that. And so one of the big challenges in the whole financial realm is to work with your spouse to come up with a financial plan that creates the kind of flexibility that if she's needed to nurture in the face of an issue or a problem, that you guys can flex and make changes to do that. And I know that a lot of people think that's not an issue, but it becomes an issue. So how you're planning to ensure that she has security from you is very significant and very important. Number 3, a wife needs significance. She needs significance. Peter writes in 1 Peter 3, grant her honor. Grant her honor. There are very few things in life that praise a woman for family-related activities. And there are all kinds of rewards that praise a woman for non-family related activities. And so, if you are going to assume leadership, as you should, part of your role is to make sure she feels her value every single day. What do I need to do to make her understand how important she is to me, to our family, and to the world out there? And that's part of what she needs coming from you. Several years ago, there was a survey that compared the values of management and the values of employees. It was really insightful. They took 10 benefits or 10 things that you would get from your job, and they asked the managers to take those 10 things and rank them in the order of what they thought was important to their team, their employees, and then they let the employees take those same things and rank them to compare what the managers thought their employees wanted from their work and what the employees thought that they actually wanted from their work. What was interesting is that when it came to the whole issue of money, the employees said money was third on the list of the top 10. It was third on the list of the top 10. Management put it first. That what employees want from me in this company is money. So first and third. That's not that far apart. But here's what's interesting. What the employees put first that they wanted in their work environment was they wanted recognition and respect for their work. And the managers ranked that dead last. Dead last. What often happens when you're in the leadership or the responsibility role, you focus on the task and you lose sight of the team. And if you do that as a husband, you lose sight of the team, the value of my wife, how much she contributes. The temptation is to say, hey, as long as I buy her things, give her stuff, and keep moving up on the socioeconomic ladder, as long as I'm doing that, she's got to be happy, right? And what you'll find is a woman is oftentimes willing to settle for a lot less on the amenity side when she's married to a man who values her as a person and her contribution, and she feels that, sees that, hears that regularly in the way you relate to her. And guys, one of the best things you can do is praise her publicly. In the Proverbs, when it comes to that discussion of the woman of value, the woman of worth, it says that her husband and her children call her blessed. Her husband praises her in the city gates. In other words, in the place where business is transacted, where all the people are coming and going, where the male leadership is sitting in judgment over the issues that are coming through, the husband is out there talking about how incredible his life partner is. That's a huge deal. Final one is the wife needs emotional responsiveness. So the husband needs physical responsiveness. The wife needs emotional responsiveness. She needs us to feel her pain. We like to solve her problems. She wants to sit down with us and tell us about her frustration, and she gets 3 sentences into the conversation, and we tell her, well, here's what you do about that, honey. And we insult her intelligence because she already knows what to do about it. She's not asking for us to fix everything. She's just asking for somebody to listen, for somebody to enter in, to be emotionally connected. One of the things we're going to talk about when we have our discussion on sex is oftentimes emotional responsiveness to a woman is as invigorating to her as sex is to a man, and they aren't separate. They tend to go together. Husbands that are willing to emotionally connect with their wives oftentimes have a lot more physical connection with their wives. Just saying, guys, just saying, okay? So, to be able to connect with your wife is one of the keys by being willing to listen to her and being willing to utter the fearful, worst words that ever come out of a male's mouth. From time to time, you need to look her in the eye and say, honey, tell me more about it. And then just strap in. So, for those of you who are in marketing, you would say that, the single most important thing in marketing is to know your customer, because you can't market to people if you don't know your customer, and there are ways that we can know our wives and understand more about them. So I've given you a list there under our application, Know Your Customer, a list of things, list of books. A couple of them are older classics, the one by James Dobson, the one by Willard Harley there. I've given you 2 more recent books by Tim Keller, The Meaning of Marriage and Love and Respect by Emerson Eggerichs. All 4 of those books are really excellent. And let me just kind of give you a tip. Just saying, okay? Go buy a book on marriage. And then let your wife catch you reading it. Don't go to your wife and say, oh, we need to read a book together. Would you go out and buy it? And then she buys it. And then what happens to that book is what happens to all the things she's given you. It just sits there on the nightstand. Like, go buy it. And when she asks you, well, why are you reading that? You just say, honey, I want to get to know you better. You may have sex that night, okay? Just telling you, okay? That may happen. It just could. Because what's attractive to her is that you care. And it'll help you grow, okay? So we're going to release you to your discussion groups. Nate, you coming up?